Sam C, take one.
Yeah. Got the Chardonnay swelling, hands ringing, latte sipping, blues.
Sam, welcome.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, nice to be here.
Let's talk about the Pardoners. How did the band come together?
I guess the Partners came together because I'd recorded an acoustic guitar album which I'd over-orchestrated. It needed a 5-piece, very expensive band to put out. So I'd started playing gigs. Glyn moved back to Melbourne, Glyn Mason, and I decided to ask him if he'd mind doing some gigs with me. So we started playing around a couple of years, and then I said, you know, you've got these great songs, why don't we start and we'll have a crack at an album. And when we'd finished it, my publisher just said, this is going to go #1 around the world. Good on you. But he said, I don't think it's a good idea to use your names. And I said, well, I think that's our brand, you know, it's who we are. He said, I think you need a name to take it to America, so they'll accept a brand. So we came up with the name The Partners. So really it's just Sam C and Glyn Mason, or vice versa. And frankly, I think the publisher was wrong, because a few people know who Glyn is and who I am, but nobody knows who the Partners were. So it was a tactical blunder, you might say. But anyway, we are the Partners when we're not Field, C and Mason. How confusing is that, you know?
So how did the Pardoners name come about? What's in that?
Look, it wasn't really significant. I mean, we were just driving back, driving back from our meeting with my publisher, and we're sort of throwing names around, most of which were obscene. And I sort of said, why don't we get something, like, what about something from literature, like, Hamlet, Othello, or, the Canterbury Tales. The Pardoner, the Pardoner's Tale. And Glyn's going, oh yeah, that's pretty, The Pardoner's. I kind of like that. And unfortunately, most people think it's the Pardoner's, we're a cowboy and Western act.
Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin.
Yeah, truly. But anyway, so that's how it came about. Briefly, I should tell you about the band that I nearly joined, which was called, I was a kid in Sydney and I was trying to get a gig, and I went over to the north side of Sydney and I played with these guys, and I had a girl playing keyboards, and it was a great night, I was having fun. And they said, yeah, look, we've got gigs, we've got the image, we've got everything all sorted out, you'd make a perfect addition to the band. And I said, oh really, that's great, it was fun. Yeah, so what's the name of the band? And they said, The Lemon People. And I said, I think I can join.
The Lemon People.
The Lemon People. And you've never heard of them, with good reason probably. Anyway, so after that, I was hanging around in Sydney with a lot of Scottish and English fellas, and through them I met Clive Shakespeare, and so I was in Sherbet.
Was that pre-Darryl?
Yeah, that was pre-Darryl. We had another singer, Dennis Lachlan, who was a great showman, but nobody, is as good a singer as Darryl. And we knew Darryl because he was sort of in our circle of friends, and I can't remember if it was me or the bass player who said one night around the kitchen table, we've got to get Darryl in the band. And so we went on, the whole bunch of us went and said, look, we can have 2 lead singers like the Amen Corner, and you'll be it, and Dennis can be the showbiz, and it'll all be fabulous. And then Dennis didn't, he freaked out, so Darryl became the man.
And history proves that was a good decision.
What a singer. Still singing great today.
Yeah.
The thing about Sherbet was that I was playing keyboards, and ever since I Feel Fine by the Beatles, I wanted to be a guitar player. And not that was the only thing I liked on guitar, but that was that feedback at the beginning. I wanted to do that. And so, yeah, I got an offer to join Flying Circus, who'd recently parted company with Red McKelvey, and I was supposed to be playing guitar and keyboards in that, but at our rehearsal in the country, the truck broke down, the keyboards never arrived, and I was just playing guitar. I must admit that I did sort of do some damage to the car. So
yeah, the phone call was worth it.
Yeah. Anyway, so I was playing guitar in that band. They had Hayride, La La was a national one, number one. I think Run 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 was another top tenner. And then they sort of, like most bands actually in those days, the record companies would say, we've got this smash hit song, you must record it. So they were all poppy things, but Flying Circus was really more into the Byrds and the Flying Burrito Brothers, that sort of country-ish, country rock sort of thing. And so they were great at it, and I learned a lot about, the whole bluegrass world and stuff from those guys.
You took the band overseas for some time. How did that go?
I had this knack of joining bands that had won the Battle of the Sounds without actually having competed, and I just want to say it was totally coincidental, please.
It was 3 bands that did that, is that right?
That's true. And Flying Circus had won the Battle of the Sounds, and then they fell out with Red. They asked me to join. We went to San Francisco first, had an absolute blast for a few months, but we couldn't work there. And we'd done a tour with a Canadian band. We'd become friends. Our manager hooked up with their manager, and they organised a tour in Canada. And even as total unknowns, we were making twice as much money as we'd made in Australia as a supposedly toppish act, Meanwhile, Destiny called, and Fraternity, who was a band that had Bon Scott as the singer, called me up. And in fact, they didn't call me up. Phone calls were too expensive in those days. I got a telegram. And they said that their keyboard player was leaving. Would I like to do keyboards and guitar with them? They had had a hit, Seasons of Change.
What was it like being in the same band as Ronnie Roadcheck?
Yeah. Well, I have to explain a myth to a certain degree, because Bon was, on stage he was certainly a lunatic and a wild man, but he'd go around and visit, and he'd be the first guy and say, would you like a cup of tea, or, an iced Bovo or whatever was lying around. No, he was a sweet boy, Ronnie, and I think the interesting thing to me is that he, just before he died, he came round and saw everybody. I don't think he said to me that he'd had enough of the band and he was tired and he wanted to buy a pub and retire. In his case, I know what buying a pub would have meant, but I think he just had that whole routine and maybe outgrew it. From Fraternity, Flying Circus called and invited me back. We'd been in England for, I say, the longest 10 years of my life, but it was actually only 1972. That band had just ground to a halt. We were all miserable, and I took the escape hatch gladly, Jack. It wasn't going anywhere. Life just, went mad. The band had got this Capitol recording deal, the first Australian band to get an actual American record deal, independent of Australia. Billboard and Cashbox had it as, ones to watch. And then suddenly, as has happened to a few bands, the guys who were pushing the Flying Circus button were no longer working for Capitol Records. They all got the boot.
And the bottom fell out of it.
Yeah. So we'd been sitting around in London for months waiting for our agent to sort of get us a tour, and he did get us a tour of Germany. And we thought, well, this is actually quite promising because the Beatles, after all, went and did their time in Hamburg. But first, we've got this gig with this band called Status Quo, and all we knew about Status Quo was that they'd had this song called Pictures of Matchstick Men, which I thought was a stupid song.
What year was this?
We're in England in 72. I think the Matchstick Men was probably 70 or something like that. And frankly, I just thought it was ridiculous. Anyway, so we were driving down to Bournemouth in our bus, which our manager had stupidly shipped over to England because they don't have buses in England, Jack, you know what it's like. And we're driving down to the gig, got our gear in the back, we're having a few drinks. We're just going to cream these guys. They're going to be hopeless. So we get down there, we couldn't get into the theatre, the Bournemouth Odeon. What's going on? You know, what's happening? And they didn't expect us. Finally, after about an hour or so, these two Bentleys pull up in front of us. And these guys get out dripping in velvet and satin finery, and we're looking, bloody pommy poofters. I think Bruce said that. Or maybe I did, I don't know. Anyway, so we were laughing at them, and we went on, we did our support gig, and we thought, try following this. Meantime, of course, they had stripped into their denims and they turned the rest of the PA and the whole light show on and blew us apart. So look, I mean, I think you're right. You know, I've had some fabulous experiences if you disregard the fact that none of those acts made it. Flying Circus broke up. Terry, the bass player, and I joined a Canadian band called Lighthouse. Very big in pockets in the States that you wouldn't expect. We'd suddenly be playing on a tour, we'd have Tower of Power supporting us on one tour.
Wow.
I mean, we had some amazing gigs, like we played in Hawaii to I think 50,000 people, and I think maybe it was Cat Stevens supported us or somebody huge. Mason was the result of coming back to Australia from Canada. Greg Quill had recruited Chris Stockley from the Dingoes, and we'd become firm friends, and neither of us was very confident in our ability to be the lead singer. And Chris mentioned Glyn Mason, who I'd met one night 10 years previously, and so we just sort of said, Glyn, are you interested in doing a band? And I remember his reply was, as long as I can make more than I do on the dole. You know, so it wasn't a very lofty ambition.
Yeah, good strategy though.
Yeah, I guess so. And you know, I have to say my ambitions were a bit higher than the dole, but there you go. And it was fulfilled. Like we sort of threw this band together in 2 days, did a support for maybe sports, I can't remember. The agency thought we were great. Suddenly we were doing 5 or 6 gigs a week, you know, and who does that anymore?
Well, it was a cracker band. You had 3 really strong frontmen. The harmonies were sensational.
Yeah.
And you had a great rhythm section, Dave Stewart and Jeff Rosenberg.
Glyn and Chris and I were really in tune with not being flash guitar players, you know, like I'm the flash guy, you're the Brian Jones. It was just very much you'd sort of hear Stockley going mental on something and you just pull back a bit. It was very sympathetic.
Yeah.
And so that's why it worked without too much rehearsal. And then suddenly when we did start rehearsing, it started getting quite slick.
You recorded one live album.
Still sounds great, and unlike the Eagles, there were no overdubs. I mean, it was all live. We didn't tune up our vocals like the Eagles and other people who do live albums. No. So it's what it is what it was, and I think it still stands up pretty well.
There weren't too many bands getting songs from a live album, getting it played on the radio.
Yeah.
It was a very popular album and a great album. People can find it, they should pick it up.
Yeah. Oh, I think they put it on CD a few years ago, and I think I bought mine for $2.50 at JB Hi-Fi, so bargain.
Well, I've got the record and I paid $10 for the CD, so I've got both of them. Well, you said before that you've written some shocker songs, which I'll respectfully disagree with. A couple of them have become pretty big hits.
I'd been John's kind of de facto music director at the end of the John Farnham band, because I think it was a weird, sad thing, but I mean, we had quite a bit of momentum going on. John was sort of honing in on what he wanted to do, and Mike Clark, who was our bass player, known as Kelly, died, and suddenly the band finished. John and I spent some months writing songs, and then suddenly LRB came calling. As you would, John leapt at that chance, and it was Sayonara Sam, which was fair enough, So I then went back into the recording studio world, doing sessions and stuff, and songwriting, pretty much. When the LRB thing didn't work in America for John, which I think was sort of what happened, I had a bunch of songs that we did with another band, pre-Whispering Jack, and I think at one point it looked as if I might have 3 or 4 or 5 on the next John Farnham album. Gradually they were whittled away.
That would have been a nice superannuation.
Well, as it is, I'm eternally grateful he did one of them. Truly, that song's been really good to me and my family, and I'm very, very, very grateful. But it's quite funny that where he invited me in to hear the vocal he'd put down, and ladies and gentlemen, if you could hear the lyrics he sang, he'd done a dummy vocal for me. And I think it was something like "Some people are assholes" or something like that. Because he's like that.
Yeah. You did some behind-the-scenes TV work on the Steve Vizard show. What was that, for about 12 months towards the end of the series?
I replaced Paul Grabowski because the producer who'd come in just thought it was a bit too jazz for the audience that Steve's humour was aimed at. So they basically wanted me to have a rocky, a rocky poppy sort of thing rather than the cool jazz thing, if that's what Paul was doing, I guess it was. That was more my approach. I had a fantastic band. I got to play with some of the heroes like Tom Jones and the guys from the Blues Brothers. We played with John Entwistle from The Who one night, who I think he'd released a book, and he came out to promote it. He had released a book, and he was pretty much completely deaf. So I was saying, John, What would you? We'd like to play something of yours. Maybe the Ox. The Ox. No, the Ox. Or Boris the Spider. And anyway, we did. We played Boris the Spider.
That was the only Who song I think you ever sang lead vocal on.
That's true. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, well done.
But so that leads us up to the Partners and what you're doing now.
The Partners is basically a duo, though Glyn and I both come from a band background. We'd love to have a band, and we know just who we'd like to be in it, but we can't afford it. So Glyn and I also are great mates with Lindsay Field, who's well known as, probably best known as John Farnham's backup singer, which he's been doing since Whispering Jack. Glyn and Lindsay and I used to work with Brian Cadd, and from the first time we sang together, we just gelled. So from time to time, when Lindsay was free, we'd do gigs that weren't necessarily partners, although we'd do a few partner songs. We'd just do songs that we liked, like Nowhere Man by the Beatles, like Baby I Need Your Loving by the Four Tops. That sort of stuff.
And that's where that third harmony comes in handy.
Totally, man. And I think, people are coming to gigs and still like to hear those songs, mostly because they're as old as us, and if you can get out of the way of the Zimmer frames. No, it's fun. Anyway, so I said, I reckon we should do a show based on Australian hit songs that we like. We don't have to do, it doesn't have to be number ones, just songs we like. And so we've taken songs like Pleasure and Pain, Beds Are Burning, Don't Change by In Excess. So a really wide variety of songs. Gypsy Queen by Greg Quill's another one. So it covers a whole area. And I've arranged most of them, and what the aim is to kind of do an acoustic-y thing with the three voices.
What's your day job?
My day job is being a dog walker, a gardener. I do most of the cooking at home. I write occasional ads and music video, like a doco music, and I'm the main driver in the family.
What's the biggest bowel loosening moment you've ever had on stage?
Oh boy, I've had a few. Probably the biggest one was at a gig in Orillia, Ontario, Canada, and we used to start off with this a cappella opening to the show, and we all came up to the mics. They were live, and the three of us were thrown 15 feet over the back of our amps, smashed our heads on the wall, and gig over. No, now we're buzzed. We're going to come out and play. And there were only about 10 people there. Honestly, it was one of the best gigs I've ever had. It was fantastic.
And if we were at a Sam C trivia night, what's one of the questions we'd ask?
Seriously, the question I'd ask is, name a musician that has been in 3 Hoadley's Battle of the Sounds winning bands without ever having competed.
And Sam, if you could be one other person for one day, who would that be?
I think, because my dad might be watching in heaven, I would like to be Darryl Baldock, who played for St Kilda in their premiership.
Because you're a big Saints fan.
I'm a lunatic, unfortunately, the worst club in history. But no, I remember we had a lot of joy, and he was an interesting man apart from his football prowess. It's a pretty low ambition. I could have said Jesus or Gough Whitlam, but never mind.
All good men.
Yeah.
Sam C, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Jack.
Thanks,
it's been
mate.
Fun for me too.
Cheers.
It's over and done. Good thing is over and done. It's over and done. Over and done. When a good thing is over and done.